Anyway, we'll talk about what we've learned the last 4 years of citrus. I do want to mention this website. If y'all are not familiar with this is scgrower.com. You go to it, you go to the bottom, you enter your email address, and you get a weekly email. I promise we won't spam you, but every Monday at lunchtime, you'll get an email. We just send the crop report out every Monday. So agents that do what I do across the state, when we're going out and we're seeing tomatoes, cucumbers, citrus, whatever, we just talk about what we see, weather, diseases, insects. It just kind of keeps you abreast of what's going on. It's also a good landing page. We have a podcast if you're into that. Our resources page, we have all of our vegetable crop handbooks. The Small Fruit Consortium, we have all the resources you need there. We also have plant, seed, and nursery suppliers that we can't say recommend, but ones that are highly reputable on that site as well. There's some calculators for doing fertility, for changing your soil pH. There's a lot of information on there. And this is our upcoming events tab. Anything that's fruit, vegetable related or pesticide related, we put there as statewide. So a lot of people have asked, the Citrus Expo, I know some of y'all follow it on Facebook. You can also follow it here. We'll post it here as soon as we get it published every year. So anyway, I just wanted to bring that up to y'all. It's a good resource. Some of y'all maybe heard this talk, some of it before, but we'll kind of do it a little bit different this year. But as y'all are familiar with, there's a lot of citrus being grown in this area. There's a lot of roads. I don't know if y'all noticed it yesterday, but Mandarin Meadow, we passed that road. Did anybody notice that yesterday on the way to the farm? Lemon Tree Lane. There's a lot of old roads named that. Citrus has been grown here since the 1600s. And there was actually a really big citrus industry here until a couple frosts and a couple hurricanes back to back to back just kind of wiped it out. But we were actually exporting a lot of citrus overseas before we were a country and kind of during we were a country. So anyway, so it's got a long history. They're really productive around here. But the problem is a lot of people have knowledge of like what they've grown, but we don't have like a collective knowledge of everything that's out there. And I don't think we ever will. But when you come to something like this and you see that they have a billion different varieties, like it's hard to know like what's going to do well and what's not. So we wanted to do some research on some common varieties and look at different parameters, which I'll talk about in a second. But also I think events like this are really important. What's worked well for y'all versus what's worked well for us, and kind of compare notes and weeding out things that do well and things that don't do well. So our objectives, we wrote a grant a few years ago to look at cold tolerance in citrus for the South Carolina Specialty Crop Block Grant Award. That's pretty good that I said that. But the first thing we want to look at, we want to look at tree performance, we want to look at cold tolerance, we want to look at growth rates, we want to look at fruit set, yield, fruit quality, all the things that people care about, we want to look at it. And really the varieties that are more commonly available from different nurseries. And then secondly, we want to monitor for the Asian citrus psyllid. We have not seen it, but we are looking for it. We have found citrus greening in Charleston County. Gus, who was here earlier, he works for Clemson Department of Plant Industry. They have found citrus greening and cut down some trees in South Carolina, but I haven't heard much of that lately, which is a good thing. And then the third thing, and this is kind of what today really represents, is getting this information out to the stakeholders and make sure that y'all are kind of aware of what we're doing and how we're doing and how we go forward. So somebody asked when we started planting. This was an old peach orchard that they did rootstock research on way back in the day, and it was just kind of abandoned. So we pushed up all the trees about 8 or 10 years ago. There's great berms out there. It does not drain well, but it's the highest site on the farm, if you can believe that. So there's berms already there, and it wasn't being used, so I asked if I could do some research out there, and they said, sure. So this was my first go at planting citrus. I went and saw Stan. He sold me a bunch of trees. They all died. And it's not Stan's fault. It's my fault. I was just so eager to do this. I planted them in, I think, late October, and that's the first mistake I learned. You got to plant them in the spring, and I'm glad that happened. Because I've told so many people now, you got to plant them in the spring. They got to get a chance to grow, get settled in, kind of go through a summer, and then acclimate to what's coming in the winter. It didn't help that this was a really cold winter, if y'all remember. We had a lot of growing or chill hours that winter. So anyway, it sucked. I kind of got my feelings hurt for a few years. And then in 2021, we came back and wrote the grant to look at cold tolerance. Went down to Madison Citrus, and I was nervous on the 6-hour ride home because the van was scraping the ground. I didn't know I was in the citrus in. But Stan, I don't know if he's in here, Stan was like, well, if you're going down there, you might as well give me some citrus while you're there. Anyway, I don't want to do that again. But some of the trees that you can see here were a little larger, and I felt that they were ready to go out in the field earlier. And then some of them were kind of like some of these, and I held them in a greenhouse for a year. So even though I got them at the same time, there's different ages out there. This is what it looked like when we planted in March of 2021. And as you'll see, this row right here is the first row out there. So just incredible amount of growth for just 4 years, 3 years, 4 years, I'm bad at math. This is 2022. So a real big jump from 1 year to the second year. And then we lost some trees, some of the smaller, weaker trees, so we replanted and then planted more. We doubled the amount of trees that we had in April of 2022. This is kind of what it looks like as it kind of fills in. And this is last year during August. So it's just amazing how much these trees grew. These are sugar bell. I think he had some fruit over here. Y'all see out there when we go out there later. It's just they're head and shoulders bigger, faster growing than other ones. I've heard that they have some issues because they grow so fast, almost like a Bradford pear. But they have issues with splitting and that sort of thing. But the trunks on them are just—it's just amazing how much bigger and faster they've grown than the other trees. So varieties, we looked at just whatever was available and is commonly available. So in 2022, we had 32 different varieties. We only had 2 rootstocks, Rubido and Carrizo. If I'm saying anything wrong, sorry. We had some that didn't have a rootstock, and then some of them just came unlabeled, and we're just going with whatever rootstock they were on, right? I'll talk about it in just a minute, but we had the Christmas of 2022 freeze. It killed half of my plants. I was really hurt again. Spent days crying about it. I really miss that. I'm just kidding. But that's actually what we wanted to happen. We wanted to lose some trees because that's a field growing, and you can't ask for a cold event than 16.5 degrees, which we got here. I got some farmers that are in their mid-80s, and they said that they've only seen that type of cold in Charleston a handful of times their whole life. So if something can live through that, I feel very confident recommending those varieties going through that. So I'm glad we lost half. Of the varieties we lost, we replaced a bunch of them. We put some new rootstocks in. So now we're up to 97 plants, and as you can see, we have some variation in the rootstocks. So these are the varieties that we have. Again, they're on your sheet, so I won't talk too much about them, but I'll go through them towards the end. And if I put one in the wrong category, to me, I don't know, y'all might be more into it, but citrus is so interbred and crossed and trying to figure out what goes to what and what's what. This is as close as I can get. So, all right. So one thing that I really wanted to look at, especially if
that one.
I
just wanted to take a picture.
Yeah, well, I'll have this one later, and I'll have the ones I would recommend out of these and ones I wouldn't.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. One thing that I really want to look at with the citrus, and especially if we got folks that are going to grow it more for just more than just your home use, like if you're going to commercially grow it, maybe sell it to Grow Food Carolina or places like that locally around here, is when do these things come in? When is their peak ripeness? And if I'm a grower and I'm growing maybe 100 plants, how could we stack the seasons where we got some coming in throughout the season and we got a longer harvest window versus pulling up one day with a tractor trailer load and say, can you get rid of this? Okay, that hurts everybody when we do that. But if we can stagger it, it helps everybody, extends the season, and really gives us a lot more visibility. So this year we began a brick study, and before y'all make jokes, I know you don't pick on green. All right. But we started this brick study October 3rd because we did have some that were starting to color up. What bricks are is just a measure of sweetness. That's not the only indicator of citrus. It's kind of a complex relationship between bricks, which is sweetness, and then the acidity level. but we don't have the titration and the acidity stuff, so we're just looking at bricks now. Maybe we'll write a grant, get some equipment, and look at some other things later. But, so we started this October 3rd. Each variety, we picked the ripest looking one on each tree. We cut it open, take a picture of it, kind of look at it for color, and then we put it in this bricks meter, and it tells us the bricks. I don't know if y'all can see this one, but Zyshan or Zishan, I'm not sure how you say it, 15.8. Pretty good. Pretty good. I'd say that one was dead right, okay? Or close to it. This Tango here, Sugar Bell, Brown Select, Miho, and then Owari. So you can kind of see they're coming in about the same time, but there might be a week or two difference between them, which is kind of what we're like going toward. So the takeaway here, and don't get too caught up in this, but each bar represents a different date and then the sugar level at that date. And I know it's going to vary if we had taken 3 or 4 from each tree, but we don't have that many from each tree, so we only did 1, which is not really good science, but this gives us a good background knowledge if we want to do a more elaborate, deeper experiment. But what I want to show here is I want to kind of see a progression where it's low in October, and then through November 13th, it's slowly creeping up. So when do we hit that level where in the published data, it says those bricks are ready, right? What does that look like? Okay, so nobody get mad at this because this is just my guesstimation at this point in time. We're going to elaborate on this. I'd love to talk to y'all to see when things are coming in, but I would really like to make a chart. Other states have these and other crops have these. I've done this for blueberries. I have blueberries out there. I've done it for those. If somebody comes to me and says, I want to harvest, some type of citrus in this window because I have workers here and it's between my tomato harvest and it's between my maybe pepper harvest or something, I want to be able to tell. That's terrible examples because they come in the summer. But maybe collards, right? Collards and broccoli, let's say. But I got labor here, and I need to keep them busy. Then I'd like to be able to say, okay, if you want something for them to do the first week of November through the third week of November, this is the variety you need. If somebody comes up and says, I want to be able to produce citrus for a longer season, I want to be able to give them this chart, okay? I'd like to see things, I'd like to get some earlier stuff, and I'd also, these are guesses because we haven't had much fruit because they're only 4 years old, but I want to see stuff over here too, okay? Can we hit Christmas markets? Can we hit Thanksgiving markets? I'm thinking about this going forward. What are our markets? What variety should we be going for those markets?
Well, I understand like on the blood oranges, they want to harvest those more for the springtime because they want time, I guess, to develop the blood orange,
right.
The blood color.
Right. Y'all don't? Or? Yes, I got some caras on there. Cara, however you say it. So yeah, so this is going to change and develop over time, but this is my best guess right now. So if you disagree with me, let's talk about it. Problems that I've seen. Sarah went over the mite problem. Y'all see some ugly fruit out there. This is from russet mites. They look pretty rough. But what's interesting to me is some cultivars or varieties don't seem to get it as bad. Now, is that random? Or is that something that's going to happen over time? And so from a management perspective, maybe somebody wants to grow them organically or no pesticides. Maybe there's certain varieties that we can recommend that we don't have to spray because the insects don't prefer them as much, right? So just kind of taking all of this and kind of figuring out what direction we want to go with it is important. Leaf miners, I've had terrible leaf miners damage. Maybe y'all disagree, but in a real young plant, if you got a real bad infestation, it might hurt them. I just don't know, once the plant gets a little size on it, how much damage they do. It looks terrible.
It doesn't seem to reduce yields in a mature tree.
It's kind of what I'm thinking. So
what was his comment?
They don't seem to reduce yields in a mature tree. So the last year I sprayed a neonicotinoid on them one time and it cleaned them up. But kind of what I see with the leaf miners is every time you get a flush of new growth, and I'm usually getting about 4 flushes a year, is usually right after I fertilize, which makes sense. So kind of putting that together and saying, okay, if I'm fertilizing now, I'm going to get a flush here soon, so I need to be prepared if I'm going to manage leaf miners right after that fertilization.
Are they also variety dependent? I mean, I'm having trouble with the limits, but those are also my most immature ones.
Right. And it could be that. That tree could be signaling for those insects more. It could be preferential. It could be variety. I don't know. That research might be out there. I just don't know.
But the leaf miners there's a whole lot of them. I mean, different moths or whatever that cause it is the one particular one that she didn't seem to say that picks on citrus more than
right.
the others.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. All good questions. Anybody ever seen this? The old orange dog? I didn't get any this year, but last year I got tons of them. So this is a giant swallowtail butterfly. It's a beautiful butterfly. It's like this big. And this is the larval stage. This thing is really cool. If you touch it, which I did like 1,000,000 times out there because I have a bunch of them, they have like a forked tongue. It's not a tongue, but let's just call it a tongue. It looks like a snake tongue. And when you touch it, it goes, and then it like rears back and it puts out this smell. It smells horrible. But it's fun just to mess with it, right? So it's a fun party trick. If you have these, you're like, hey, check this out. But last year I had hundreds of these out there, and this year I didn't find any. I didn't treat because I don't know, it's just a pretty butterfly, and I didn't think they were going to kill my tree. One tree was really small, maybe a little bit bigger than those, and I actually took those, caterpillar, y'all gonna make fun of me, but I took those and just moved them to a more mature tree. So anyway, I have a hard time killing butterflies. But they're easy to manage if you need to manage them, but I don't think they're too big of an issue. Ants. Anna Sarah didn't mention this. This is probably my biggest problem.
She did mention it, but it seemed like they go for the honey from the mealy bugs or from the aphids.
Well, but what I find out here is I put some tree protectors on the plant, and they'll build a nest in the tree protector, and then they'll girdle the plant, and then the tree will start looking back. I got a yuzu out there. We'll look at it later, and it was beautiful 3 weeks ago, and it started looking bad, and what happened was I used the inner tubes from bicycles. You go to a bike shop, I use that to tie my plants up because it's not abrasive. But anyway, one of those had slid down around the base of the plant, and ants got inside of there, earwigs, not mealybugs, but roly-polies, and they girdled it, and so the plants just, they took away the vascular system of the plant. So I'll be glad to show you all that out there. But ants are really bad. If you need to treat for ants, I like to recommend baits. So baits are different than the stuff you just pour on top. Baits work by that whole area is about 2 acres. So what I'll do, it's about 1 pound to 1.5 pounds per acre of a bait. And the bait, you broadcast it over the whole area. And the worker ants go out there and they get the bait. They take the bait back to the nest. They chew up the bait and make a saliva, and then they feed the babies. And when they feed the babies, it's got the poison, so it kills the entire nest. The stuff you pour on top of them makes you feel good, and it kills that nest, but a lot of them leave. The baits, it gets everybody. You do the baits twice a year. Do the old potato chip method. You take a plain potato chip, throw it out there, come back 20 minutes later. If there's ants on that potato chip, that means they're actively foraging, and you need to put that bait out. Okay? Put the bait out in, for us, March, April, and then again in October. We call it the Texas two-step. And you do that for 2 seasons, and you won't have many ants. I've not done that. I've done it occasionally, but then I'll forget it for a year. So that's why I have ants out there. So really good way to get rid of ants in your orchard or your lawn or anything. Just know that when you're managing for ants and use these baits, there's ones you can use in your lawn, and there's ones you can use in the fruit and vegetable garden. So make sure, technically it says for fruits and vegetables. And we have a fact sheet on the Home and Garden Information Center on this, and it tells you the ones that are used, that are baits, ones that are used and labeled for the vegetable garden versus the ones that are used for the lawn. Okay. Weed management. I spend most of my time managing weeds out here. Dallas grass, crabgrass, Bermuda grass. I have a real hard time killing blackberry, and then dog fennel. I don't think it hurts anything. It just looks bad just because it gets tall and you're like, oh, you're not managing. So these are some ways that I've tried to manage it. I'll go through some of these. This is the last resort, and this is if I get behind or change a lot, this is what I end up having to do, and I do not want to do that. I don't want to keep y'all from doing that, unless you just like weed whacking. Part of the study out here, I'm talking about weeds, but this kind of goes right into weeds. We have three trees per variety out here. The first one, tree in every variety gets wood mulch, or wood chips that you get from any company that's cutting down trees. The second one, we use a municipal compost. And then the third one, we're leaving bare ground. And we're doing a study within a side of study to see, does it have any effect on the tree health, the growth, that sort of thing of the tree. In Clemson, they've been working with compost for years on peach trees. And I did it with some of them at the time, but when I planted the first ones, I didn't get to put it in the hole itself. But they've shown with peach trees, if you put compost in the hole of the plant, you get accelerated plant growth, you get healthier plants, you get, in peaches, you get a bacterial spot on the fruit. You know, you kind of see some flecks, maybe y'all have seen it, maybe not. You don't get nearly as much of that. And then the bricks on the peaches are a lot higher. Okay? And so what we're trying to do out here is set a study up to where we can maybe look at this one day and look at those parameters to see if just adding a little compost to the hole actually helps. But from what I've seen, the wood mulch does pretty good at managing weeds. The compost, believe it or not, I get a lot more weeds in the compost. It kind of makes sense because it's fertile. It's almost like a fertilizer. So any weed seed that blows in, it's going to germinate. So I don't think it's great for weed management, but it's good for the tree health. And then you'll see out there recently, I met a guy, he's a local coffee roaster, and they have the burlap bags, and they go through, he has a warehouse full of them. He's like, I'll give you as many as you want. So I've actually started putting burlap bags as weed mats around the trees in it. I don't know if it works, but it makes me feel good. I think it keeps the weeds at bay for a little while. So it's a free resource. It turns into mulch. It's a good mulch, essentially. It'll break down pretty quick. So go nuts with it if you want. You'll see out there I got some herbicide strips. The next year I'm going to be really working on the herbicide program for citrus, kind of mimicking what they're doing in Florida and Georgia. But this year, kind of my program, I use glyphosate or Roundup, essentially. If you add AMS, which is ammonium sulfate, it's just a fertilizer, if you use that to your backpack sprayer or whatever before you spray Roundup or glyphosate, it heats it up and it makes, it's called synergy. It makes it work like 10 times better than the glyphosate on its own. So you can actually use less glyphosate if you mix it with this and get the same results, which is pretty cool. If you add crop oil to your glyphosate in a 1% solution, it eats the waxy layer of whatever weeds you're spraying, and so the glyphosate gets into the plant easier, and you'll also have better weed control. So,
I'm sorry, what is crop oil?
Yeah, if you could, horticultural oil, or you'll go to like a farm supply or a turf store, it'll just say crop oil. It's just a.
Does that work better than surfactant would?
It's a type of surfactant. Yeah, for weeds, I think it does. Yes.
That's agricultural. I know that.
Yeah, and it's cheap too. I mean, it's a fraction of what the chemical costs, and it makes it work a lot better. So I sprayed glyphosate 5 times a year. Every time I spray out there, it's about $11 worth of product. And I did 5 times, so $55. This is a game changer. This Chateau is flumioxazin. It's a pre-emergent herbicide. It's just like a pre-emergent that you put on your lawn. You put it on. You have to have bare ground. Okay. You spray it on the bare ground, and then you turn your irrigation on, or you have a rain event, and it washes that herbicide into the soil about this deep. And I can get 6 weeks of weed control. It's clean for 6 weeks. Okay? So I do that in the spring, right before the weeds are going to germinate in the spring, and then I do it right in the fall. The key with these pre-emergent herbicides, again, is making sure the soil is clean so the herbicide can get in the soil. And then also making sure we activate it by using a little water and timing it right. So if weeds have already germinated, I've missed my window. Okay? So in your specific region, kind of know when the soil is going to get warm enough to make those winter and summer weeds germinate.
Is that grasses included or just weeds?
It will get some grasses, but it's a lot better on broadleaves. But it'll get grasses too. If you have grass problems, I have a ton of grass problems in the summer. So I use a product called cefoxidim. There's a bunch of different names for it. It is incredible in grasses. It does not kill anything else. So you have to make sure it's a grass. Nut sedge is a sedge. It looks like a grass, but it's not a grass. If it's crabgrass, Bermuda grass, Dallas grass, you spray it with cefoxidim. Sometimes in the farm supply stores it'll be called grass killer. It only kills grasses. It takes about 14 days, but it's dead. Okay?
Is this the same thing as preen?
I'm not sure what's in preen. Yeah, it has 1,000 different trade names, but the active ingredient is cefoxidim. So my herbicide cost this year was $184 for that whole area, which I don't think is bad. Plus all the irrigation emitters I hit by weed eating, which is probably $184.
Is all that stuff safe to put on fruit and trees if you're going to eat the fruit?
Yes, good question. They are technically labeled for fruit trees, so you can spray it. All you have to do is look at the label and it'll tell you how many days after you spray that you can harvest.
Harvest, okay.
I think this one is 30 days, but the rest of them are like 2 days. I mean, it's not long at all. So this is what I did this year. This is my timing on it. I got started a little later this year than I would like to. I'd like to have a February application, but I had back surgery last winter, and so I wasn't quite feeling good enough to go out there and spray. I only sprayed Chateau once, and I should have done it twice. And then, as you see in March and July, when grasses get out of control, that's when I use the grass-specific herbicides. So, again, this is just an option if you want to have a weed-free barrier around your trees. This is pretty cool research they're doing at the University of Florida. I talked about synergy earlier. So, if I use one product, it works pretty good. But when I use another product, it works pretty good too. But when I put them together, they work better than they would individually on their own. So this is the Chateau product that I was telling you about. Here it is at 8 ounces to the acre. And this is the weed control at 5 months. So I'm only getting about 10% of the weeds coming back, right? But when I use Chateau plus Allion, so 2 different chemicals, this is when the synergy kicks in. Almost get 100% weed control at 5 months. So you're talking about efficiency. If you're growing a large orchard, putting down something one time and walking away from it for 5 months.
Do they have different mechanisms of action? That's what,
those 2 do, yes.
In taking care of humans, that's what we do with antibiotics. We try to pick like something like penicillin and gentamicin because they work differently on bacteria.
Correct.
And so I guess, and that's where the synergy comes through. Sometimes they're just additive.
Sure.
But you would like to have an advantage to using them both.
Yep. So these are in definitely 2 different modes of action, and all of these are too. So this is a group 11, I believe. This is a group 3, and I think this is a group 1 maybe. So all these are rotational partners as well as these. But yes, these when you tank mix them, they do a really good job keeping the weeds down. So theirs did something that mine didn't somehow. This is Owari. Looks good to me. Yep. Just did a little pruning for me. Somebody asked about finger limes or the desert limes. Whew, those things, I think you say the word cold and they die. And they're so thorny, I'm kind of glad they died. I came home looking like I got to fight an alley cat. So, I'm not going to go into the scientific method of how we did it, but we had the field study where we just wanted to see what would die, and then I would take samples from every single tree, about 30 leaves, and send them to campus, and they would do a study, and they can do a predictive study of when these trees, what the estimated cold tolerance of these trees are, based on these leaf punches, okay? So, based on that data, this is the estimated freezing temperature of these different varieties. So I'll let y'all look at that for a second. And again, this is lab data. The lab data pretty much match what we saw when we had the cold events.
Did you use any kind of spraying or freeze protection for those trees? Nothing.
Because it was Christmas, I was home with my family.
Okay.
I'm like, I ain't going out there. I was 4 hours away. I'm like, let them die.
That's part of the job.
Yeah.
That's how we learn.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
The first tour we had of was with Barfields, and she talked about mainly protecting the trunk of the tree. And she talked about putting bubble wrap around the tree trunk and the main stems. Is that useful?
I don't know. I bought the pipe insulation from Lowe's on the real small trees and put that around it, and I don't know if it did any good, but it makes you feel good. Yeah, right. So these are the visual cold damage ratings. So the lower the number, the better the tree looked after the freeze, and the higher the number, the worse the tree looked. Okay, so I-Chain, believe it or not, I don't know if y'all, I-Chain's terrible, but that's great cold tolerance. It looked relatively unfazed. Okay, and then you had the dead rating. So I did the visual rating right after they got zapped, and then I did a rating if they were dead or alive in March of that year. I probably should have done it again later, but I got antsy and pulled out trees that I thought were dead, but probably could have grown back. I don't know. But you can kind of see what survived and what didn't in March after the cold freeze of 2022 at Christmas time. So the green is the ones that have done really well. All of them are alive. Interestingly enough, even though these had terrible, they looked terrible, all of them didn't.
What's the bottom?
Kara. Yeah, and then Sure was the one above it. And again, they looked terrible, but they came back. Same thing here. Just some more. Again, these, you're getting towards the ones that look real rough. And then you get more depth with these. All right. So, I'm no expert, but based on what we've seen out there and what lived and what didn't, these are the ones in green. Like those are the ones that did really well. They look good. They're still looking good. The ones in black are like, nah, we need to look at them a little more. And the ones in red, I'm a little worried about. So, and again, this is just based on 3 trees that are out there. You might have a different experience. Good? All right. So kind of going forward, I feel as an extension agent, being on the coast, I feel a lot more confident recommending varieties of citrus, especially ones that are maybe a little more proven in a situation like this. I think if we're going forward as a group producing citrus for markets, I think quality is going to be really important. Right now we have a few people are selling, but the markets are kind of wide open, so I think we should go to those markets with super high quality instead of really high quality standard of excellence, and I think that'll help us out long term. So I see that so much in vegetables is, people grow a lot of vegetables and you have extra and you just kind of dump it on the market to get rid of it, but it really hurts everybody because you kind of get the standard of, oh man, he sent me bad squash or bad brassica or whatever. So I think that's important. I think there's going to be an uphill battle with consumer education, selling these things locally, especially varieties they might not have heard about, comparing everything to like a cutie. You know, they put all kind of things on there to make them look sexy, right? These are pretty, but you know, maybe not as sexy as a cutie, right? So I think educating consumers, even ones that are a little bit green, that these are still dead right, they're good, is important. And then not only selling fresh fruit, but going forward, developing markets for citrus. So I know in Georgia, I went to a talk at this fruit and vegetable conference a few years ago. They have a UV pasteurization device, essentially. So when you pasteurize things with heat, it kind of takes away some of the flavor. But with UV pasteurization, you retain a lot of the flavor. So they had mandarin juice. You know, some of the best stuff. I mean, it tasted like you just squeezed a mandarin in your mouth. But I think they're very expensive. But I think there's opportunities to maybe form co-ops. A lot of opportunities to do things collectively as a group. And I just see with this group and this group of people, a lot of the growers I work with, the groups kind of butt heads and fight and take over market shares and that sort of thing. But I think with this group, there's an opportunity like to really have some collaboration and kind of work together to do this as a group. So that's all I got. I got questions.
Herbicides?
Yeah.
Are those also, I don't have a farm.
Yep.
I have grass. So would they kill the grass? Would those be killed?
But they're pre-emergent, so if you spray them on grass, they're not going to do anything. You got to kill the grass before you spray it. So you got to kill the grass with glyphosate or that suboxone
Kill the grass.
to get it clean. Yeah. Yeah. And those products are expensive, so unless you have an area like this, it's probably not going to be worth it for you because you got to buy a 2.5 gallon jug, and it's going to last you until you die. So maybe share it. I don't know. Just don't put a pesticide in a bottle that it didn't come in. Okay. Against the law. Going to take a quick walk out there. All right.
Where can we get the raffle tickets?